Starting off the show today, though, want to talk about the Boston Celtics, who are officially moving on to the next round. They beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, a very shorthanded Cavaliers team, 113-98 in their Game 5 matchup. We saw it in Game 4. Donovan Mitchell unable to go. He was dealing with a calf strain. And then in this next game, we saw it was more than just Donovan Mitchell, where Caris LeVert, who had also been a key player for the Cavaliers through their first couple rounds, he was out as well. And there really was no excuse for the Celtics to come up short. Now, credit the Cavaliers. They were fighting their way into this game, and it was because of a couple key performances. The first that I want to highlight is Evan Mobley, because I do feel like as we get into this conversation around where the Cavaliers go from here, we saw the aggressive version of Evan Mobley. He knew that he needed to step up in this instance, and he definitely did so. Scored 33 points, smashing his career high in the playoffs. Took 24 shots, and again, that level of aggression was very much needed from him. And I thought that he did a really good job continuing to show that, in an offense where there is more spacing around him, he can do maybe a little bit more work under the basket than he gets credit for a lot of the time. Again, we've talked about this at length dating back to the Orlando series, especially once Jarrett Allen was ruled out with the rib injury. The fact that he is just so good at working with space in terms of his teammates are driving, he positions himself in the right spots to sort of get himself open looks at the rim, and I thought that was a lot of what he was doing last night as well as a part of his performance. So that was definitely at least one thing that the Cavaliers fans can sort of come out of this win with. We also saw Marcus Morris sort of put in a crazy performance that was definitely not expected. Marcus Morris, he ends up scoring 25 points, 10 of 13 from the field, 5 of 6 from 3. Marcus Morris is kind of funny because he, of course, was a Boston Celtic for a handful of years, and it definitely, at least personally, myself as a Celtics fan, I do remember this version of Marcus Morris where every once in a while he would get red hot, and when he was maybe a little bit on a less established team, he was on the Celtics as they were sort of rebuilding during those Isaiah Thomas years, and yes, they were competitive, and he was with the Celtics for even a little bit of stretch into when they started being a prominent conference finals team, but felt like at that point it was definitely a much younger Celtics core, and he felt like he deserved a larger opportunity. And some of the ball stopping with him, and again, I don't mean to, dump on Marcus Morris by any means. I'm just saying that this is something that we've seen from him in the past, at least as a Celtics fan. See him be able to take over games individually. The consistency of it wasn't always there, but he was phenomenal last night. And it's not like the Celtics were just leaving him wide open, which is something that we've seen the Celtics do in a defensive, schematic strategy to let other players hurt them. This was Marcus Morris just pulling up over everybody. He was backing players down, working in the mid-range, and he was just automatic last night. So, give him his credit. It was the first time he scored 25 points since March of 2022, but ultimately, Cavaliers just did not have enough firepower. And again, I do want to go more in depth into the Cavaliers situation as this show progresses, but for now we will sort of stick to the Boston Celtics, where it definitely wasn't, the most convincing performance necessarily, given the fact that the Cavaliers were as shorthanded as they were, and it sort of took a while, it felt like, specifically for Jayson Tatum to work up. Again, the common theme, it seems like, of the past couple days is talking about the aggression level of some of these stars, where it felt like for a lot of the game, both Tatum and Brown weren't necessarily, working to their spots, and yet they were able to carry the lead through the majority of the game. They were in large part carried by Derek White in that first quarter, but then he got a little bit more quiet. And this was also, and we'll get into Tatum momentarily, but this was a very big bounce back game for Al Horford, who had really been struggling the past couple games. We saw that he was 0 for 10 from 3 over the past 2. I talked about this before, the fact that Evan Mobley just did not respect his perimeter shot, and it seemed like Al didn't even necessarily trust himself all too much, and Mobley was just able to cause havoc at the rim. But Horford definitely found his shooting stroke a little bit more last night. 6 of 13 from 3, can't have any complaints there. But it wasn't just that. He was making some of these hustle plays to track down loose balls. I thought that he had a couple really nice defensive possessions. Now, granted, he still, when it came to Darius Garland, who also struggled in this game, but again, we're going to continue the Cavaliers conversation about this a little bit more in the next segment, but he was able to sort of benefit from guarding a lot of Dean Wade, who definitely after the win the Cavaliers pulled off in the middle of the season where they came back down 20 points in the fourth quarter. Dean Wade did sort of have at least this threat of being something, but was just pretty ineffective, and the fact that he was in the starting lineup for the Cavaliers just sort of goes to show that this Cavs team was just so run down from an injury standpoint. Dean Wade was a game low minus 27 in this game. So, regardless though, I thought that Horford had a much better contribution to this game. Felt like they legitimately needed him to win it. He had some big shots in the fourth quarter as well, but it was a little bit interesting where, texting with other Celtics fans, it was a little bit of a Jekyll Hyde situation where he would have these bursts where he looked incredible, and then he'd come back the other way and definitely look like the older version of himself. So this is just something that I continue to highlight in terms of the Celtics are going to need Kristaps Porzingis to win an NBA championship, but Al Horford is, just as good of a professional as you can get. He is reliable, at least in these limited minutes, and in this game too, ended up playing 35, so they definitely leaned on him heavily in this game. We saw that in game 4, they were sort of going in favor of maybe a little bit more Luke Cornett minutes than usual, and I wasn't a huge fan of that personally. I know that Evan Mobley must have been a good fan of it, because I mentioned this in the fourth quarter of game 1, where Evan Mobley seemed to really relish that matchup, and, again, from a Cavaliers standpoint, do have to be encouraged that Mobley, it did seem like, and this was something, again, dating back to the Orlando series, where you saw him wanting to create more for himself, and in this instance, it seemed like that was a matchup that he saw another big that he felt confident he was going to be able to go at, and he did so in a very successful way. So I definitely, Mobley, I think, boosted his stock over the course of these, especially last few games in the series here, and it's definitely going to be a part of the conversation in terms of what the offseason ahead looks like for the Cavaliers. It was already sort of known that Evan Mobley was a building block, but there were some questions surrounding him, and I still think the fit with him and Jarrett Allen is a little bit of a question mark, but Mobley is somebody that Cavaliers fans should definitely be feeling good about coming out of this series, and it is unfortunate that they sort of had to deal with this and see their season end without a fully healthy group, because you don't necessarily get all of the answers that you were hoping for because of the fact that we didn't really get to see specifically, I'm going to point to the 4, big pieces for the Cavaliers in Garland, Mitchell, Allen, and Mobley. We didn't get to see them all play together necessarily, so that does sort of add a little bit more questions about, you don't have these definitive answers headed into the offseason. But final notes here on the Celtics. Did seem like Jayson Tatum, about halfway through that third quarter, is when he started putting his foot down and going into a little bit more of an aggressor mode. I thought that he was really impactful yet again. And again, for a superstar player in Jayson Tatum who doesn't necessarily get a ton of media attention because of the fact that there are all of these other players, and his type of superstardom doesn't necessarily look the same as a Jalen Brunson, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Edwards, any of these loud performances. Tatum, it does feel like he is best when he flies under the radar because he plays incredible defense. He is a tremendous rebounder, and he just makes the right decision every single time facing these multiple defenders. And, all-stars do get extra attention, so that's definitely not an excuse, but it's the fact that that Jayson Tatum specifically does make the right plays in these instances where some of his counting stats might not be quite as tremendous, but regardless, he still helps the Celtics contribute to winning. And, the Celtics move on. This isn't very much of a surprise. Draymond Green was on TNT at halftime, or it was after the game, and said, frankly, nobody cares that the Celtics are back in the conference finals, which, as much as coming from Draymond, you do kind of want to react as if, well, here's Draymond talking again after not even making the playoffs. But he does have a little bit of a point where we've seen this with the Celtics before. It was never about making just the conference finals. We need to see them take that next step, and here they are again with a prime opportunity to be able to take advantage of this. And no, they haven't necessarily had the most difficult level of competition up to this point, but losing Kristaps Porzingis was a big deal in my eyes, and yet since then they've only lost one game. Now, obviously, they're also playing injured rosters on the other end, but to lose your, third option like that and really haven't seen them stagger all that much and having to lean on Al Horford as much as they do and shortening up of their bench, I just feel like it's one of those things. It's kind of hard to give the Celtics credit because they've been in this position so many times, but I don't believe that there are many teams for that matter that could be able to withstand a loss like that and really not fall off whatsoever. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. We are going to dive more into the conversation about the Cleveland Cavaliers because of the fact that this morning we already got all types of different rumors about the different offseason potentials for this roster. So we're going to answer questions about where Donovan Mitchell could end up, whether or not they think that they can run this back with the same group, what JB Bickerstaff's job security looks like, all of that and more. But first, we are going to be taking a quick break, and we will be right back.